What drags down our entire economy is when there's an ever-widening chasm between the ultra-rich and everybody else.
Yeah. President Obama has built the entire campaign on statements like these that focus on income inequality. Is he right? Is inequality killing the economy and the American dream? A new study says, well, not so fast. I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me on set, Terry Jones, Associate Editor of Investors Business Daily, and back from his world tour promoting Occupy Wall Street causes, Yaron Brook, President of the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights. Welcome back, Yaron. All right, guys, a new study published by the American Enterprise Institute shows that despite all this rhetoric about income inequality, standards of living across all income groups have increased. Hey. And this is over the last decade. So what is your reaction to the report? Because this idea of equality, of course, is one of Obama's big thing. And I think, Yaron, you've said before that really what, socialist, is he this, is he that? You've said he's an egalitarian. What do you think of the report versus the rhetoric here? I'll lead with you since it's been so long since we've heard your...
Well, look, this is a big issue for the president. This is a moral issue. This is his whole claim about fairness and everything. This is what motivates, I think, the liberal and leftist base out there is this issue of inequality. And it's fundamentally bogus. There's been plenty of studies that show that inequality is measured the way they measure it. And I think it's hard to figure out how exactly to measure. There's this latest one at AEI that shows the consumption is basically
that rates of consumption are actually highly consistent over a long, long period of time.
If you include in income, if you include benefits, and if you include transfer payments, so in other words, if you look at after-tax income, not before-tax income, after-tax income, the gap has actually shrunk. It hasn't enlarged. And there's a study now at Cato. There's a study out of the Hoover Institute. There are a bunch of studies that show that. But look, this isn't the issue. Who cares what income inequality is? And this country was never about income equality. That shouldn't be a goal. The real issue is all the government programs that inhibit economic growth, that inhibit us maximizing our standard of living.
And what about the fact that for 70 years the government has been trying to solve inequality problems, and yet a problem apparently, you would hear, the problem is getting worse and worse and worse. So it sort of begs the question, well, if it's getting worse and worse and worse, what have you all been trying to do, and what are the efficacy of those policies? I mean, Terry, to me, that's sort of the obvious question. Like, you've been on the case here for 70 years. It's not like you just woke up and when you took office, President Obama, and go, oh, gosh, there's income inequality. What can we do about it?
It would seem to suggest that no matter what the government thinks or does, people are going to be unequal, no matter what. And quite frankly,
shocking.
Some people aren't good looking. Some people are. Some people are very good at high math. Other people aren't. People are different. And in my opinion, high inequality is a very positive sign for an economy, because you have to have people who are able to achieve at very high levels for the rest of us to be able to get into their slipstream and do better each and every year.
Because we've talked about, there's also studies that come out that say, like, the book that the woman wrote, I can't remember her name, about how empires fall or civil, certain eras that countries have fall, and that one of the markers of that fall is income inequality, is the lack of a middle class and this disparity between what the president would say the super wealthy. And now it's not enough to say wealthy anymore. You have to say super wealthy, the millionaires and billionaires. And that gap is a harbinger of bad things to come. What would you say to that?
I think if the middle class is truly eliminated, then yes, that's a problem. But why would the middle class be eliminated? It would only be eliminated because of government programs. The middle class is a phenomena of capitalism. It is a phenomena of freedom, of economic freedom. When you start restricting economic freedom, start restricting the entrepreneurial spirit, start making it required to get a license to shampoo hair like you do in California, when you make it difficult for people to make a living into advance. The greatest social mobility in human history was in 19th century America. When you were born poor, you could become rich. If you were born rich, you could become dirt poor if you didn't work hard and if you didn't think about what you were doing. So income inequality is not the issue. The real issue should be mobility. And in order to maximize mobility, what we need is to maximize freedom. And the other problem, I think, that is related to this fall of empires is when you establish a class that believes it's entitled. And part of what we've done over the last 100 years is established a whole entitlement mentality where people expect to get stuff. And they expect their standard of living to go up even though they're not working, or even though they're not doing anything, even though they're not producing for themselves. And that's when you get civil unrest. That's when you get civil disruptions.
Terry, going back to the idea of that this particular study looked at consumption rates, and that consumption rates are highly consistent over a long period of time. What about the credit market in that? Because a lot of consumption happens not because people have the money in their pockets. A lot of consumption happens because they have a credit line at Best Buy and at department stores and miles on their cards and all that stuff that incentivizes borrowing, is which of course a lot of people get in trouble with borrowing. So some of this consumption may be equal, but at what cost to those who are consuming beyond their means? Is that factored into the study, and should it be?
Well, it is factored into the study, but in my opinion, that's not really that significant. I mean, okay, yes, access to credit is a very important thing for everyone, granted. But when you look at what's happening right now in our government, we have Dodd-Frank that's been promulgated, and the Consumer Finance Board that is going to be sitting on top of every single financial company in America, other than insurance companies and securities.
Unaccountable.
And unaccountable,
Yeah.
with an unaccountable person at top. That is not, in my opinion, that is no longer a market. That is a government-run enterprise. And banks are not going to be willing to extend credit to people who are even moderately questionable in the credit area, because they'll be afraid of having to take a bailout or being taken over.
Yeah, you've heard a lot of sort of, particularly since the financial crisis in 2008, you heard this attack on capitalism, and you talk about it in your book, which we're going to do in another segment about it. Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged sales skyrocketed on the basis of this critique of capitalism. But what do you think is really behind it, given that there's so many metrics that you can apply, as we are doing now, where you can say, well, that's not really quite the whole context, that's not quite the picture. What do you think is behind it? Really, there's sort of an emotional element behind it, this critique on capitalism, and the idea that, we had free market capitalism up until the year 2008, and it was a disaster, and now we've got to fix things by reining it in.
Look, it's driven by a lot of things. It's driven, the emotion, the whole idea of inequality is driven by envy. It's driven by the idea that it doesn't matter how well I'm doing, what's really important is that that guy's doing better than me. Now, in a truly free country where people actually have self-esteem and they earn what they get, you would celebrate the fact that your neighbor's doing really, really well. And you would celebrate the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobses of the world, because by them, how do they do well? How do you become a billionaire? By selling products and services that we all consume, that we all want, that are making our lives better. So what you should be caring about is, how is your standard of living increasing? How is your level of freedom increasing? The whole idea of equality is a bad, evil idea. We don't want to be, I use this in some of my talks. I say, I'd like to play basketball like Michael Jordan. There's only one way to achieve that. You know what that is?
Lower the rim by 2 feet.
That wouldn't help. I still wouldn't beat Michael Jordan, right? I couldn't even get the ball. The only way it would work is if we broke Michael Jordan's knees and if we broke his arms. That's what equality really means. To get equality, you have to take people who are able, you have to take people who make a lot of money or extremely productive, or whatever field you want to create the equality in, you have to take those who are exceptional in it and break their arms. And taxing them at a high rate is the same as breaking your arms. It's still your property, which is being taken forcibly away from you. So the goal of equality, which our whole culture seems to adore these days, and Obama is capitalizing over that, is an evil goal. It is a goal that involves breaking people's legs and arms. That is the purpose of this establishment. It's the lowest common denominator.
Because, Terry, the old saw goes, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But the fact is, the rich get richer and the poor get richer too. Because when you look at standard of living, even the poor in America have DirecTV satellite dishes on their roof. Yes. Many of them. I'm not saying that there aren't desperately poor people in America who are disadvantaged, but a lot of the class that would be considered in the poverty class have cars, air conditioning, appliances, and satellite dishes. And so the idea that there has been mobility throughout that spectrum, that entire spectrum has moved huge over the last 100 years.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, when you look at, periodically the census does actual questionnaires and hands them out to people and says, what do you have and what is your income? And what you find is that the poor have significant amounts of wealth. 80% of them have air conditioning in their home. 30% of the poor have 6 bedrooms or more. Okay, this is this is a great place to be poor if you're going to be poor in America. And the study we were referencing at the very beginning of this suggests that the amount you consume over time stays very stable. The bottom fifth of the income distribution consumes about 9% of all goods and services in America. The middle fifth consumes about 17%, and that's stable over time. And the top fifth consume about 37%. So that has remained stable. Inequality is not getting worse. By the numbers, it is not getting worse. It's really very stable. But the Democrats have every interest in the world of splitting us up into groups and saying, you should envy them because they have more than you, and making it a political issue.
And that by having, there's also the implication that, and they got it unfairly.
They got it unfairly.
They got it by gaming a system against you.
And we're not trying to defend the system as it exists today. We think it's rotten. We would like to see a lot more freedom. Right. And so the fact that inequality stayed by some measures stayed flat is no virtue. It's neutral. The question ultimately is our standard of living. All of our standard of living, anybody who's willing to work, is our standard of living going up as fast as it could? And it's not. We are in a stagnating economy, and the solution is not more redistribution of wealth. The solution is not more envy and more inequality programs. The solution is more freedom, more economic freedom.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have. For Yaron and Terry, I'm Allen Barton, and you've been watching Front Page.